And now we come to Sutapa Sanyal. And what's interesting is, I think we're going to move to a different aspect of it, because of course Sutapa spent many years as a senior officer within the Indian Police Service and had Director General responsibility for the state of Uttar Pradesh with 200 million people and the world's second largest police force. So policing is something, Sutapa, you are absolutely, you've been part of institutionally for a lifetime. And yet, policing has a number of different functions, because we have discussed this previously, as well as enforcing the law, and as well as protecting from some of the things that Roy spoke about in terms of foreign state activity, potential terrorism, etc., and some of the things Thomas spoke about, which is sort of the wider social and political pressures you're working in. At the same time, the police force is seen as the protection of last resort for vulnerable people, for people with mental health problems. Who do you call if somebody has mental health problems? If somebody has mental health problems, you call the police. If somebody, we had a policeman stabbed recently by somebody who had serious mental health problems. If you have vulnerable people, child protection, domestic violence. If you're an immigrant, and we have huge amounts of immigrant community, some of whom do not naturally see the police as their natural friends, and some of whom are having a status that means that they don't want to be involved with the police at all. So from your perspective of a lifetime of being institutionally policing the state, and now seeing it in terms of diversity, inclusivity, and the protection of vulnerable sections of our society, how do we square that circle? How do we manage that balance? So over to you, Sutapa.
Well, thank you very much for having me on the panel, and welcome to my co-panelists and the audience. Well, let me give you a little bit of a background of the kind of policing that exists in my country.
Sutapa, can I just ask you before you go, can you just drop your camera just a bit, and then we will get, yes. Perfect.
Is that okay?
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Perfect.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
So, so what you just said, it kind of reflects the position on the ground, that being the uniform being the most visible arm of governance, right? Policemen, willy-nilly, they become the first responders in any kind of event. And it's a diverse spectrum of events. It can be COVID, it can be another law and order situation, it can be anything, mental health, it can be child rescue, it can be anything, right? It can even be dealing with terrorism on the ground, say the sleeper modules or the open outfits. So let me go back to around about, say, 1985, I'm of the 84 batch. So when I go to the academy and we have our outdoor and indoor classes, well, these were things which we hadn't even heard of, the kind of changes which have come into policing, right? And for, developing nations, police personnel, people actually look up to them for everything. The cop standing on the road, a person coming in may ask the cop about the address of a particular person down the lane. Now, it doesn't make much sense, but that is the kind of, I'll say, dependence or the trust which people have on police personnel. And so that brings you and gives you greater responsibility to respond in the way, in the manner in which you must respond. So policing has seen a lot of changes, mainly for historical reasons and for so many other forces which are operating in society simultaneously, right? I mean, gone are the days, I think, when the able-bodied of the society or the community, the able-bodied men, would be sufficient to look after the policing needs of a small community, right? But then again, I would say that no matter the changes that we have seen, no matter how much more changes come in. I think the two core functions of policing would be the detection and prevention of crime, and number two, the maintenance of law and order. Most of the things, most of the circumstances, most of the events would fall in these two categories. And basically, I think that is what every cop will have to deliver. Because I feel policing is basically a service delivery system. So we have to design our responses around this thought. Now, we are seeing a lot of new crimes emerging over the past, say, 2 decades, 3 decades. It's become a totally new scenario, right? Of course, the body and property related crimes still exist. You still have murder, you still have felony, you still have kidnapping, abduction, etc., etc. But then, society has changed, and a lot new number of crimes, not lots new types of crimes have come in. You have big organizations, they have issues like frauds, they have risks like cyber threats and so many things. Then you see a whole lot of online crimes emerging. And now this can take any dimension. You have things like cyber frauds, you have small things like cyber bullying, you have online sexual abuse. It's a whole basket of new crimes. And this online crime business is a parallel of every other offline crimes that we have been seeing down the ages. So, and why this has happened, what I feel is, my sense is, and as Roy and Tom have been saying, because, now crime does not have geographical limits. Those boundaries have simply gone because of the development of the internet, because of greater accessibility to cheap internet services. So it's become an international arena. So whether you look at some protest in a particular country, it doesn't take much time to spread. And then on top of that, you have media and social media. It just takes seconds for things to become viral, right? So we are so closely knit. We are more connected than we understand. And that is how the nature of crime has changed. The butterfly effect, it passes on from one segment to another, one state to another, from one country to another, right? So you see, technology is actually a double-edged sword. How you use it, it depends on that. And I really wonder if a day comes when crimes will be thought of, planned by human beings, but executed by bots. We may see that day, we don't know, the way that technology is progressing. Another new crime that has surfaced, and this must be world over, I think, is the theft of intellectual property and copyright related issues, right? So this is another thing which is coming up fast. And then various kinds of organized crimes, various, like you have arms deals, you have the drugs deals, and most importantly, something which I work on, that is human trafficking. I mean, what you would call as modern slavery, and all its ramifications. And it's, I feel so moved by it, because it's the worst possible kind of crime which a human being can do to another. Exploit the person for personal gains, for monetary gains. And you have an entire basket of crimes under human trafficking, starting from labor, forced labor, right? You have organs trade, you have trade for commercial sexual exploitation. So everything, and again, these things are shifting to the online mode. I mean, can we imagine? And we call ourselves civilized, and look what we are doing. We are buying and selling human beings online, especially children and women. And this is a reality. It's a horrible reality, but it is. Now, who could have thought, if I reflect back, you know, in 84, 85, when we were in the academy undergoing our training, these were things which we never imagined. These were things which we were never taught about, because we couldn't visualize that these changes are going to come around, but they are. And then you have money laundering. Money laundering is as much an outcome as much as a promoter of all these online crimes, right? These are all internet facilitated crimes. And then because of course you also have the dark net part of the internet, where all kinds of illegal activities can be done. Of course, there are other activities also, but these illegal activities occur in that dark region of the internet. And you have the growth of cryptocurrencies, you know. They have their own merits, but they also have their demerits, because most of the money laundering and most of these activities, these criminal activities, whenever payments are made, they're generally made in cryptocurrencies, because you cannot track them so easily, right? So these are the new challenges. And of course, terror in all its formats is something which is bothering most of the nations. And most certainly it bothers us because of the kind of stuff that is going on in and around our country. So now, apart from this, you have other regular challenges. Modern cities have other challenges too, especially in a country like India, where there is a great load of the population, right? So what are these challenges, other challenges apart from the law and order maintenance and the crime detection and crime prevention? We have a lot of traffic management issues. Modern cities will have a lot of traffic management issues. And then we have a lot of security work, which relates to the VIPs and the vital installations. And then on top of it, you have emergency situations, which can flare up into law and order situation at any point of time, like natural calamities and natural pandemics, right? You have migrating populations, because in our country, the rural area is about 70% plus of our country. And the labor largely migrates from the rural areas to the places where there is industries growing up, industrializations happening. And industrialization has brought in its wake a lot of good things, but a lot of, there's a downside to it. Urbanization has a huge downside because of, you know, breaking down of family structures, breaking down of communities, societies, migration away from the homes, all of this, lots of civic utility issues, and the growth of peri-urban areas. And these peri-urban areas, unfortunately, they become the hotbeds of all sorts of crime, including the organized crimes. They have you have gangs who have their own turf, they have turf competition, they have their own people, and they function in a vicious manner, right? So, and they're all over. They're all over. And because of urbanization and industrialization, the socialization process of children has also changed. Urban poverty is an issue. It must be across the globe, but it is a major issue in our country, right? And especially where both the parents are struggling to make, both ends meet, the child gets neglected. And one, very disturbing trend which has been growing up has been children who are in conflict with law. That is becoming a large segment of the population in our country. It would be becoming so in other countries also, but it is going to prove to be a big challenge for India, for Indian police, more so because, we have the largest population of children in the world. About 40% of our population is children. So that is going to become a very important thing which policing needs to address. And then a couple of other changes have come in which are impacting day-to-day policing in our country. There is a change in the expectations of people, the attitude of people. They're more, social media, everything. There is a lot of exchange of interaction. There's a lot of interaction. And so people have become very much aware of their rights. Now that makes, that becomes important because now policing has to change in its format. Police personnel have to change their attitude. They have to walk the razor's edge where they are a representative of the state. They have to maintain law and order, and yet they cannot go against the population, right? We have to be a part of them and yet maintain the law and order. So now this becomes a very, very difficult balance, but I think with the passage of time, the force is adapting to the changes. The force is thinking out of box also. And so these things are there and they are changing. Now, I feel a couple of things also need to be concentrated upon. Like, policing, of course, it will be defined, as I said, in prevention of law and prevention of and detection of crime and maintenance of law and order. But I think there has to be a fine balance because the nature of crime is changing. Opinions are changing about the police, and the concept, the philosophy, the outlook of policing also needs a change at this stage. The mission, the vision which police personnel wish to carry out in society. What I feel is it cannot be that oppressive arm of the state, right? We need to look at ourselves. The police personnel have to, the department has to look at itself as a trustee, as a trustee of the community. The old patterns, the old formats of coercive policing, reactive policing, I don't feel they're going to work anymore, right? Like other organizations, we also need to be resilient, we need to adapt. And just as other organizations, they are looking at leadership, which is empathetic, which is compassionate. This department will also need leaders who have compassion, who can empathize with the people, who can, who have a finger on their pulse, who understand. Because you see, ultimately, at the end of the day, you are policing for the people, and we have to give them the kind of policing that they need. And times have changed, right? So we have to change our thinking also, our attitude also. Am I audible?
You're very much audible. I was going to ask you, Sutapa, because it's very interesting because, of course, the world has changed in the last 35 years.
Yes.
No surprise.
Yes. Yes.
To a large extent, policing tends to be reactive historically in that, cybercrime comes in. I think most police forces will accept they're probably behind the curve in terms of cybercrime, certainly when terrorism changed. Roy, I was very, very happy to hear you talk about the lone actor rather than the lone wolf. Every time somebody mentions lone wolf, a part of me dies. I get stabbed in the heart because it tends to sort of create this, I'm a lone wolf, which lone actor is there. But policing has to change. And I know India quite well. I lived in India for 2.5 years in the 1980s. I lived both in the city, but I also lived for a year in a village, in a community village in Tamil Nadu. And of course, you cannot really have much more difference than, in Gate of India, Mumbai, or Gurgaon, now in Delhi, where you're, and, rural village in Tamil Nadu. Both geographically. And how do you create a national policing system that fits over both of those. Because
See,
I'm sure that for Roy and for Thomas as well, you know, it comes down to the question of what is it we're trying to do here? You know, what is our, you know, what do we call ourselves as policemen? What are we trying to do? And like in so many things, in India, it just seems to be more dramatic than anywhere else.
See, I don't think it's going to be a uniform format, right? Right. Like you rightly said, rural, urban policing. Even in urban areas, you have a place like Mumbai and Gurgaon, and you have a place like Lucknow in Uttar Pradesh. So it will need different kinds of, and much depends on the kind of, you know, the social inputs. Like in India, I do a lot of work, you are aware of it, on women, right? I have done a lot of work on gender related issues while in service. Now, you know, women in India, we have the subcultures of silence. We have the subcultures of victim blaming. Now you understand in this format, which woman is going to come forward very readily and talk of any sexual abuse committed against her. It's very difficult. So policing has to cater to the local needs. It won't be a uniform format. Of course, there will be a lot of things which would be common, but it won't be identical. It will vary from place to place in our country.
Thank you, Sutapa. Thank you. I mean, India is fascinating on so many things. We tend to learn from the dramatic and from the extreme, and the pressures on Indian policing. And we haven't even touched on political pressure. We haven't touched on, unfortunately, corruption. We haven't talked on a whole load of other things that, you know, are around there. But